I come from a very eccentric and unusual household. My father is from Pakistan, my mother is Afghan, and I myself was actually born in Oslo, Norway. What's formed me is having a father who was incredibly supportive and loving and didn't treat me any different from my brother. And beyond that, I think growing up with women in the public space, but also in my own home, looking at my mother, was tremendously inspiring for me to see that women can live and be absolutely great and live with all their hearts, and that there's a place for that. My father was a very eccentric man, a really wonderful man, he still is, but he wanted his children to be stars. And the reason for that is that he, as a Pakistani man living in Norway, had faced a lot of discrimination, and he felt that the only two professions, and he in fact said this to me when I was a child, he said, there's only two professions in the world where you will not be judged and discriminated against based on your gender and your race. One is sports, and one is entertainment and the arts. And he said, I know nothing about sports, but I do know something about music and the arts, so I'm going to put you in that. He made this speech to me, and then he grabbed me by the hand and he walked me through our home, picked up all my dolls, all my Barbies, all my toys and everything, put it into a black garbage bag and said, now wave bye-bye. And I was obviously completely horrified and didn't want to do this and was just crying. But he did. He said, no, really, say bye-bye. And then the very next day, he gave me a little crappy little keyboard. And also I started training and studying music. Everything was great for a very short period of time, but the more prominent that I became in the public space, the quicker and more strongly a very fierce sense of disapproval started growing against that, against me and against my family. And the shape that this took initially was that I would call it delegations of men would basically come to our house and would talk to my father and said, we don't accept this kind of behavior. We don't accept our girls partaking in the public space in the way that your daughter is, so make her stop, make this go away. And my father, being my father, would every single time would just show them the door and said, it's my daughter, it's my problem, and I make the decisions, and not you, not the rest of the group in the community. So I continued on, and as my career progressed and I started becoming even more and more prominent, the harassment and abuse started coming directly towards me. I had people pull knives on me in the streets of Oslo. I had people trying to abduct me from my own school. I had people attack me at my own concerts. We had endless death threats, endless descriptions of how I would be violated, how I would be raped, how I would be cut, how my stomach would be turned inside out so that another whore wouldn't be born like me. And at one point, by this time I'm about 17 years old, things became so severe and so difficult that I remember at one point sitting down with my mother at the kitchen table, and she started to cry, and she said, you know, we can't protect you anymore. Do you understand that? And I looked at her and I said, yes, I absolutely understand that. And the very next morning, in fact, I packed a very small bag and I bought a one-way ticket and I went to London. I left my friends, I left my family, I left my younger brother, my mother, left my career, left every single thing that I knew and that was safe and that was home for me. I left my home country. What hurt me and broke my heart the most was the silence that surrounded this, because what happened to me was not something that was hidden. When I left, my story was on the front covers of every national newspaper in Norway, and nobody said that this is wrong. It's not okay for a young 17-year-old girl to be treated in that way. I was utterly broken from it and really disappointed, really scared. And I remember thinking at the time how horrible and biting that loneliness is, to stand in something like that, completely isolated. And people treating you as if you're diseased. They don't want to even come close. They don't want to acknowledge even that something like this occurs. And I remember thinking at that point that if I can ever do anything for someone else so that they don't feel that sense of loneliness, then I will always do that. It's free. It's free. It doesn't cost me anything. Solidarity doesn't cost anything. It just costs us caring. And that I can do. I realized that this wasn't working. This was never going to work. This thing was never going to leave me. That I was going to have to do something that I've never done, which is I'm going to have to, rather than packing my bags and leaving, I'm going to actually have to address and face and really tackle some of the underlying issues around this. When I looked at all the work that needed to be done, I realized that, well, I'm not so many things. I'm not a politician. I'm not, I'm not a skilled researcher. I'm not an academic. I cannot sit and produce reports and do the research and some of the work that really desperately needs to be done. But what I am, and what the skill set that I do have, is I'm an artist. So what I decided is that where I can be of some use is to try and tell the stories of what's really happening. And I wanted Western, in particular, Western audiences and Western authorities to understand that honor killings, honor-based violence, honor-based oppression is something that does not only happen in Pakistan or in India or in Iraq or in Afghanistan or in various other countries, but it happens in the US. It's happening in Oslo, it's happening in London, it's happening in Amsterdam, in Paris, in Berlin, in Copenhagen. And what are we going to do about it? And what does that really look like? What does that do to someone on the receiving end of it? And I wanted to do that through the story of a young woman named Banaz Mahmoud. Banaz was born in the Kurdish region of Iraq. As a young girl, along with her other sisters, she underwent FGM at the hands of her grandmother. At the age of 10, Banaz and her family moved to the UK because they were fleeing Saddam Hussein's persecution of the Kurds in Iraq. By the age of 17, Banaz's parents decided, well, not her parents, her father and her uncle decided that she should be put into a marriage with a man who was 10 years her senior. This man turned out to be incredibly violent and incredibly abusive towards Banaz. He would rape her, he would beat her and be absolutely horrible to this young woman. She eventually decided she couldn't take it anymore, so she went to her parents saying, I would like a divorce, I would like to leave this man. And her parents confronted the husband about the fact that he was abusing their daughter, and he said, yes, I do beat her, but it's because she's disrespectful. And yes, I do rape her, but only when she says no. The family felt that this was acceptable and sent Banaz back to try harder to be a better wife to her husband. She tried and could not take it anymore, and finally took the really bold step of saying no more. I leave this, I reject this, and she started to rebuild her life. In this process, she also fell in love and found someone that she liked. And she was seen along with her boyfriend outside a train station in London kissing. And this, someone in the Kurdish community in London saw, reported back to the family and to the wider community. And within a few months, a group meeting was convened where the decision was made that Banaz had to be killed. 3 of her cousins raped her, beat her, strangled her, stuffed her in a suitcase, drove her body up to Birmingham and buried her 6 feet under a house. The added tragedy of her story is that while Banaz was alive, she had gone to the police 5 times in the UK asking for help and telling the police that she was in danger, even to the point where she supplied them with the names of the people that she'd heard were going to kill her. A lot of people have asked me, why did you pick her? Is it because it's a particularly horrible case? Is it because it's particularly brutal and violent? And I said, no, they're all brutal. They're all up close and personal and violent and horrible, because that's the point of honor killings. The reason I told her story is because of Caroline Good. When I did this very first preliminary interview and meeting with Caroline Good, she explained, you know, the whole story and the whole case and all the process and procedures of how she investigated the case. But then, as we were leaving, at the end of it, just under her breath, Caroline said, well, also, it's because I love Banaz. And I looked at Caroline and I went, what do you mean you love Banaz? How can you love someone you've never met? And she said, yeah, I know, but she said, I just feel like someone should have loved her. And because her own family and the people around her that should have loved her didn't, someone still should, so I do. And I get goosebumps even thinking about her now, but when she said that, I realized this is the story I would like to tell. And the reason this is the story I would like to tell is because that's the solution. That's the solution not just to honor crimes or honor-based violence, but that's the solution to all the forms of abuse and discrimination that we or our fellow sisters all around the world face. And the solution is we have to care. This woman, Caroline, carried the love and compassion for a woman she's never even met and turned the world upside down for this one kid. That's what we need. We have to care. And very personally speaking, my purpose of making this film was being a member of a community like that, like the one Banaz comes from. Same structures of shame and honor and dishonor, where the group owns us, where the group gets to decide what we can and cannot do, what a girl is capable of or allowed to do with her life. Coming from that community myself, I wanted to personally take a stand and draw a line in the sand and say, I do not accept this kind of treatment of women. I reject this, and I choose to stand with Banaz.